been in existence for over 10 years for folks who aren't aware of PERC, and was started as an offshoot of the PTOs in Dublin City Schools. The volunteer group of parents, community members, and district representatives work to develop programming for the year that can benefit the entire Dublin community. In the past year, we've had a rebrand to our new name, an updated logo, and a website refresh, which is still under development but very close to being finished. So if you go online, it should be mostly finished. Our new name is Parents and Educators Raising a Community, but will still be known as PERC. With our new rebranding, we're really excited to hoping to diversify just the general representation of our group. We want to ensure that we're hearing from the entire community when we're in programming for the year, and we want to make sure all district voices are represented in our group. And we invite anyone from our district community who's interested to attend our monthly meetings. We meet at 9:30 in the morning, the third Wednesday of the month at Emerald Campus. After the presentation, we encourage you to provide us some important and valuable feedback on ideas for future programming, as well as sort of your thoughts about the programming today. You go to our website at dublinperc.org and you can fill out that evaluation form, and then also if you want to look at any of the past programs that we have recorded, that would be great too. I did want to point out a couple presentations that are happening in 2022 that we're particularly excited about. Dr. Hamilton, the new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the district, is going to be presenting for us at a date in February, so wanted to get everyone excited about that. Additionally, Dr. Jess Shakin, who's a psychiatrist and author from NYU, will be visiting Ohio for 2 days in March. His book, Born to be Wild, tackles adolescent risk-taking behavior. He's a dynamic speaker and someone we would love for you to attend. You don't want to miss him. It'll be great. I also wanted to welcome Tyler Wolf tonight. He's the Director of Social and Emotional Learning at the Dublin City Schools, who's here tonight. So I just wanted to, if you want to give a quick wave. We appreciate Tyler coming tonight and participating in this event. He's been working with the presenter and the presentation we're providing tonight for an upcoming Professional Development Day in November for our teachers. So we're excited that the information presented tonight will also be presented to the staff at the district on November 2nd. So we're excited to be able to coordinate these two pieces. So what you're hearing tonight is also going to be near to the teachers as well. So we can continue with the common language and be able to talk about this in a way that we can work to embed this into practice at school and at home. So today we are fortunate to have Nicole Dempster join us tonight. Parker Houston, the clinical director of Honor Sleeves, was unfortunately unable to attend due to an emergent situation, and Nicole graciously stepped in to help us tonight. Nicole is a pediatric psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital. She actually works on the main campus, and part of her role is working with kiddos with medical issues as well as mental health issues. So she's got a really nice blend of those two pieces, and I think provide us great insight into the topic tonight, which is raising mentally healthy kids, and explaining and talking a little bit about the Honor Sleeves movement. So without further ado, welcome Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I was able to check out your website in these talks, and I've just never really seen this much community programming to really focus on the well-being of our children. I was really impressed. I am a psychologist who works mostly with children who have medical conditions in the hospital, but during the COVID pandemic, it became very aware to us that we needed to get these skills out there in the community, and I worked pretty closely with Dr. Houston to do some of these talks for different community agencies. That said, these are not my slides, these are his the way he made them, so if I fumble a little bit, I'm just trying to keep up. Make sure what we're looking at. So we're going to start with the objectives today. We want to learn how to start the conversation with our children about mental wellness. We're going to talk about some common stressors for kids and signs that our kids may need more help. And I want to also make sure we share about the Honor Sleeves movement and the available resources that we have at our hospital and online to support our community. And then discuss the importance of caregiver self-care, because we can't care for our children without caring for ourselves. So we'll start with, you've probably seen this big, beautiful building. Honor Sleeves movement started several years ago as we tried to recognize the importance of helping our community with mental wellness. Big Lots joined with Nationwide Children's and created the Big Lots Behavioral Health Pavilion. This opened in March 2020 and is the largest freestanding behavioral health facility in the country. It has brought hospitals from across the nation to look at it, try to bring this to their communities, but we are a leading advocate of children's mental health. That said, in that building, we serve our most acute care patients, so the patients who need to be held and ensure their safety and get the most comprehensive wellness care. There's also a 24-hour psychiatric crisis department, which is able to help parents at any time, day or night, help make sure their children is assessed and come up with an action plan that they can go home with. That said, behavioral health is much, much larger than that building, and we are the biggest service line at Nationwide Children's or behavioral health. We are composed of psychologists and psychiatrists and neuropsychologists and licensed clinical social workers in many, many different areas. In fact, we have a bunch in Dublin right here. We're also in Westerville and Reynoldsburg, and we have a lot of specialty clinics, things like eating disorders, autism, feeding clinics. So there's a lot of specialized care and a lot of broad care available to you. So what is behavioral health? I think a lot of us maybe grew up with the term more mental health, but we're trying to change the definition. So this is defined as the study and treatment of mental illnesses, disorders of the brain development, and behaviors that affect emotional, psychological, and physical wellness. It's a growing movement to really support our physical and our mental wellness together. We all know that when we physically are well, our mental health suffers, and when our mental health is suffering, our physical well-being suffers, even with everyday activities. So we're really looking to move past this reactionary model and start to build on promotion, prevention, and early intervention for children of all ages. And this is our why. 50% of lifetime mental illnesses start at age 14. And suicide is the second leading cause of death in children ages 15 to 25. These are alarming statistics. They take our breath away when we think about the children that we know and how much we care and love for them. And they are not meant to scare you, but to support you in why this growing effort is really needed to make sure we as a community promote mental health, identify mental health, and intervene for mental health for the well-being of our children. And mental illness does not discriminate. Minoritized populations are inadvertently experiencing much, much more. And recent data has shown, and apologies, I'm going to read a little bit of these statistics so I don't mess them up. But the suicide rate for Black children has doubled for children between ages 5 and 11. And the suicide attempts for Hispanic girls grades in high school are 40% higher than non-Hispanic white girls in that same age group. LGBTQ youth report experiencing higher levels of depression than non-LGBTQ youth. We know that about 50% of children who identify in the LGBTQ umbrella report having suicidal ideation at some time, and about 20% report that they've had a suicide attempt in that time. And we also know that children of Asian American and Pacific Islander descent are also as likely to experience mental health concerns as their non-white counterparts. However, they are less likely to get the services that they need. And so this is showing that it is important for all children, but we want to make sure we are being especially thoughtful about other risk factors. So what does on our sleeves mean? We get this all the time. You've probably seen these icons in different places and the tattoos and the broken pencil, but why do we say on our sleeves? Well, kids, like all of us, don't always wear our feelings on our sleeve. We talk about wearing our hearts on our sleeves, but very few children really project all of their feelings out there. That said, not all kids even have the ability to recognize the feelings that they have inside, and when they do get that capability, they're not even always sure how to express that capability, even if they wanted to. And so On Our Sleeves is a movement to try to identify what's going on inside to help them get it out so we can best support them. They are dedicated to providing free educational resources to everyone, and I encourage everybody to go onto the website at your home just to look at some of the things they have. They have a wide variety of educational resources for parents and children to use at home, as well as educational facilities for different hospitals and school systems. They like for us to just read their mission so you know exactly that On Our Sleeves is committed to providing every community in America with free evidence-informed resources necessary for breaking child mental health stigmas and educating families and advocates. We also support access by connecting families to trusted local resources so no family should struggle alone. I think it is one of the reasons I'm the most proud to work at Nationwide Children's is we are not only a community saying we want to be the best community and to show that off, we want to help all the communities. We recognize that your family doesn't stop in just Dublin, Ohio. We have family and friends and movements in our culture that extend across the nation, and by helping all of them, we help our kids right here. We also, even in the local community, do not discriminate and say we are the best hospital. We are partnering with all of our local agencies to promote the training of those providers and to make sure we all have access to these resources, because helping every kid helps us too. So our national impact. We remember when we launched on our sleeves about 3 years ago, we were pretty excited about the impact it would have on Columbus, Ohio. I think there were visions of how it would spread, but nobody anticipated how quickly it would spread, and it has made such a difference. Our educational content is now across all 50 states, and I'm not sure if anyone saw recently flashing on Twitter and Facebook that we were recently in Times Square. The curriculum is extending to over 3 million people who have interacted with our website, reached out for our resources, had conversations with some of our professionals in order to get this information out there. Really, it's hard to go anywhere without seeing our icon somewhere or having someone be able to cite that. Even going to a crew game, you're gonna see it everywhere. I really love that they had a goal in 2021 to reach 1 million classrooms, to give teachers the language and the resources to help the things that they recognize in their classroom. Maybe not every kid needs referral to a mental health provider, but there are little things we can do in their day-to-day functioning to help them. And they have reached 1 million classrooms, and they are continuing to spread this on. On our sleeves has also looked at making some kind of niche resource banks. So we have a section on emotional empowerment. We have a section on gratitude. I was a part of the COVID-19 development when we had to get up really early and start getting this so parents had information on a pandemic that was changing every single morning. And then we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion resource bank as well. So let's switch to kind of talking about our kids. They are dealing with so much. First of all, COVID-19. We remember when it happened in March 2020, we buckled down, we made a plan. It has been, I can't do math very well, like 1.5 years. We are fatigued, we are tired, and we are over it. This virus is invisible, but it seems to be running so much of our daily lives. It has changed so much in our daily lives, and it has impacted a lot of people that we love and care about, and kids of all ages appreciate that and notice it. There's also been school stressors, and like we said, pre-COVID, school already came with stressors. There was academic stressors, there was being able to get up and on time and make the bus stressors, and being able to participate and being brave enough to raise your hand in class. And then we've added COVID-19, where we've been in and out of the classroom and out of the classroom. We've taught on a computer, we've taught on paper. We've taught self-directed, we've been coached. There are a lot of changes, and keeping up with all of that drains a lot of our children's mental energies. There's a lot of media sensationalism, and this can cross a lot of socio-political things. That said, it doesn't matter where we stand on it, the big talking about it all the time drains our kids. They feel that impact. They feel that something is not right and people aren't coming together for us, and that is taking away from some of their happiness. Peer pressures are happening, and we know in adolescence that peer influence goes far beyond the family, and so right now we want to look at how can we do things early on to help kids know how to navigate these peer relationships. And they're being given a lot of responsibility. You're increasing what they're responsible for at school. Maybe they have jobs, maybe they have leadership positions, maybe they have home duties. They have a lot of responsibility they're keeping up with. And even just looking at this big list of things, like for us, we sometimes feel depleted, and we have had all this experience and time to get there. Kids are still learning all of that. And then we have our discomfort about talking about mental health. Kids are aware it's happening, but we're not always talking about it, and so that's something that they're thinking about, or maybe not even aware that they're experiencing. We know that mental health concerns have increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. We don't have specific data on everything, but we can say that the mental health visits to the emergency departments are up almost 33%, so we're almost a third higher than usual. That also creates some longer lines and some hardship when you're going and you're reaching out for help, and that can be complicated. But the fatigue is wearing on everyone, and this is not just kids, this is us as adult providers as well. And the kids can feel our stress too. And so we just have to acknowledge we're all trying our best, and we're doing things as best we can, and that this is really hard. I would be remiss talking about how other people are disproportionately affected, and we know that statistically minoritized populations are at increased risk, and I'd like to share a short interview by a very respected colleague. sound of your screen.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Honor Sleeves YouTube channel. I'm Dr. Parker Houston. I'm a pediatric psychologist and the clinical director of On Our Sleeves. And with me today, I have a super special guest, my friend and colleague, Dr. Jackie Doxey King. And she's a pediatric neuropsychologist and contributes so much to the On Our Sleeves movement as well. So Jackie, thanks for being with us. And we're going to talk about a really important topic today, which is tips for self-care for Black American families. And first of all, why is this such an important topic to discuss?
Thanks for having me, Parker. Yeah, this is really important because the racism and stress that Black American families experience every day can have a tremendous impact on their mental and physical health. And so it's important for us to know what stressors we experience, figure out ways to cope, and find out ways to talk about it.
Yeah, certainly. And actually speaking to that, how would a parent or caregiver know when it's time to have a discussion about mental health in their family, especially, when they might read stress or different emotional challenges in their kids?
Yeah, so it's important to check in, especially regularly. This can be little everyday stressors like school, but also things happening in the world. We also want to be able to, recognize and identify symptoms of stress in our kids and other family members. So that could be things like sadness or worry, but also if they are irritable or acting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what could parents do proactively to take care of themselves and their families? In addition to talking about it, are there specific things that families and parents can focus on?
Yeah, it's important for self-care activities for yourself and also your kids. So this can be things like mindfulness and relaxation. It can be things like community support, so your local church or community center. And then you also want to, if you need to, reach out to a therapist. Even for those small stressors, they can help you to find tools to cope with everyday stressors and big events.
Yeah, and speaking of providers, sometimes it can be hard to find a provider, especially if you might want someone who is, like you in certain characteristics or has a certain level of competency when it comes to working with different people of diverse backgrounds. So what can you consider, or what should we do if we're trying to look for a therapist, and how can we evaluate some of those things?
Yeah, it's really important to, think about what you want out of the therapy experience and what you want out of therapists to see if they're a good fit. We have a list of questions that you can ask therapists, because sometimes it is hard to find someone that has a similar background to you. But if you have a list of questions that you can ask them to see, if they're thinking about your cultural situation, you as a person of color, it can be really reassuring if you can't find someone with the same background.
Yeah, that's great advice. One of the things that people don't realize is that you can kind of interview a therapist or a mental health provider. You can ask them questions to make sure that it's a good fit, and you don't have to go with the first person that you get referred to or the first person you talk to, right?
Exactly. And you can also, let them know your concerns. There's a lot of barriers to seeking mental health treatment. There can be stigma, and there can also be just kind of historical factors that you're concerned about. So being able to talk to a therapist about those things will really help your relationship with that person.
Fantastic. Well, where can people go if they want to learn a little bit more about this topic?
So they can go to honorsleeves.org, in the link below. We have a list of the questions that you could ask therapists, as well as a link to a directory where you can find support.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jackie, thanks so much for being with us this morning, and thanks to all of you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And we really do mean that. We get interviewed all the time, and that's just fair, because lots of people like me, but I want to make sure that that's the person that's right for you and your family too. To get back to this slide, I think Dr. Doxey King does a wonderful job just being very upfront that witnessing violent acts, hearing about racial injustices, these things harm our children. Some of them it comes very personal, some of them it just they're so empathetic that they can feel that appreciation, and all of these points are really important. Kids show it in different ways too. We might see a lot of kids being overtly worried or talking about it, but there's a lot of subtle ways we might notice it. Fear and stress might look like a kid who's having a hard time in school concentrating or a hard time sleeping, which would make you have a hard time concentrating. And these are signs that these things that are happening at the broader level or even at our community level are impacting our children. We have families with different levels of acculturation, and there can be a disconnect when parents and kids maybe have different English fluency or different fidelity to the cultural customs of their families, and we want to be really thoughtful about what that's like for that dynamic, for that family, and for them within their community. We know we talked about the statistics of just having a child who is LGBTQIA. Those kids are going through more and aren't always sure who they can trust, and so then they're looking all the time to figure out who are the people I can go to, who are the people that care about me, and that adds an extra level of stress in what they're going through. So getting more towards you, so what do we do about it? And that's where I think this behavioral health term has really landed on what we're trying to do in our communities. If you jump to the bottom here, mental health intervention, that's what we're familiar with. We're familiar with traditional, when we have kind of a mental health concern, we go to a therapist, we get therapy, and we feel better. And that's still a really important part of what we need to do. But there's also a lot of promotion we can do. A lot of talking about mental health, normalizing mental health, acknowledging mental health, that just promotes its living in the community. As well as really looking at prevention, and this is one of my passions and things I stress in families, is looking about what are the things we can do early on to help our kids. These are things like addressing socioeconomic variables, decreasing poverty. We saw during the pandemic that families who didn't have access to the free lunch they counted on had more struggles. So how do we find ways in the community to help those who need it? Promoting youth programming. Kids who have identified personalities within multiple contexts do better if they see themselves as an athlete and friends with Girl Scouts, and having these different programs and more supports, they feel safer. Increasing academic supports in school and identifying kids who need help early and normalizing learning in different ways, celebrating neurodiversity, helps kids do better. So these are a lot of ways we can promote kids' well-being while not feeling like we're maybe typically interacting with mental health in a direct way, but by promoting their sense of self as a community. What gets in the way of these conversations? So many things. These conversations are complex and confusing, and they can take a lot of different turns. I hear from a lot of parents that they feel very intimidated and they feel very overwhelmed to start these conversations with their kids of all different ages. They sometimes worry that their child is too young to know what to expect. And if you think about it, I'm so impressed this many people were able to make it here today, because time is of the essence and I have none of it. And sometimes finding these things that are really important to us are still really hard to work in our day, and that's just true. There's also not one right way to start in a family. The way I do it might not be the way you do it, which might not be the way you do it, and none of those are wrong, because celebrating our kids and ourselves the way we deserve to be talked to is really important. We hear a lot of myths about mental health, and we just wanted to address them. Some people say, well, the conversations about mental health are always uncomfortable. And that can be true. They can be uncomfortable at times. What we hope is with that repeated exposure, they become less uncomfortable and feel much more manageable. What we really often hear for parents is the more that they start to initiate this within their families, they actually feel calmer about how their kids are doing, and they feel closer to their children. People often feel like they need a mental health provider to do it. What if I don't have the right answers? What if they throw a curveball at me? And what I really encourage families to do is not have the right answers. That's okay. That's what they want to hear. The first thing that does is model that not everything is easy and I don't have all the answers, so you're not crazy because you don't have all the answers. We both don't. This is hard to figure out. The other thing that can accidentally happen is if a kid tells you, I'm too afraid to talk in school, I'm so afraid that the teacher might laugh at me, and you say, well, just try this. It can accidentally maybe invalidate where they were coming from and what the depth of what they're feeling. By just giving an answer, you're not joining them right there. So you don't have to write down the answers. You're just like, that is really hard and scary, and I appreciate you telling me that. That will go much further. The time-consuming one reminds me of my childhood. I don't talk about that very a lot. I had a good childhood, but my parents loved to talk. And everything was 1 or 2 hours if I went to them. And while I trusted them and they cared for me, I hated being locked down at the table for 2 hours when I wanted to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I didn't approach them at times, and I think because we as parents feel like we almost have to do like a 1 hour therapy session. Our kid unloaded on us, we're gonna fix this problem tonight, and that's probably not gonna happen. What research really shows is that a several minutes a couple times a week has just as much of an impact and probably makes your kid trust you even more. Okay, I can tell mom or dad or trusted aunt and uncle this because they're gonna hear me, they're gonna listen to me, they might coach me through it, and they're gonna let it go. And that's what they wanna do because they have so much else that they wanna do and get back to. So where can caregivers start? And I wanna kind of stay on this slide for a minute. I don't know if we have conversation starters on here, but we might pull that up later. So what I hear from families a lot is, how do I begin? How do I start having these conversations? And I want to stress that it's never too late. I don't care if your kid is 2 years old, it's a good time to start. And if they're 17 years old, it's fine to start here too. The best thing we're doing is modeling that we learned something, we recognize something, and we're about to try something new. The first thing is find a time. Your life looks different than everybody else's life. Some kids really like to talk right after school or while they're driving to a sports practice. But you also have to find time that your kid is willing to talk and that you have the capacity to hear it. When I leave my work day and I'm kind of running over some of the things that happen and pick my kid up, I might not be in that right headspace to give them the answers I want to give them. So I might not make that time to listen to music, and we'll do our conversation at dinner. For other people, it's before bed, but you might have the capacity later in the night. I'm a night owl. So it's really figuring out in your family what works for you. The other thing is I want to get creative in talking about it. If we ask our kids every day, how was school? What do they say? Fine. They're anticipating that question, they're not interested in that question, and we're not getting anywhere with that question. But if we switch it up, tell me what you learned about in science today. Did anything make you nervous? What's one moment that you were brave? That gives them almost a lead-in to answer. They've already given them half the sentence, and it switches it up and it gets their brain really much more engaged. And so we don't have to feel like mental health has to feel like therapy questions all the time. It's really just eliciting more conversations where you can pick out where your kid and how your kid is doing. I talk to families about modeling their own coping a lot, and this is gonna look different depending on how old your children are. I currently have a 3-year-old, so I will knock over my Magnetel tower and be like, oh, I'm so frustrated, that was hard. I'm gonna take a deep breath, can you help me do it again? And that models that I also get frustrated and I'm learning to cope. A lot of families want to seem like we're okay, we're fine, but then kids don't feel like it is normal to have all of these feelings, and really showing them that you do and that you are a real human, which we know you are, and how you cope, that's one of the best things we can do. As they get older, you can be more vulnerable around them. I missed a deadline at work, that was really embarrassing. I'm gonna work a little bit later tonight. That shows that you have also made mistakes because our kids are making mistakes and we're trying to create a safe environment for them to talk about it. No time's not to talk, and I think this is a really important one. When you are feeling your most frustrated and angry, I don't want to be talked down. I am committed to being frustrated and angry, and I'm pretty good at it. And sometimes approaching a kid when they are just roaring mad and saying, tell me what's wrong and what we can do, throws them off of their game and can actually amplify some of that stress by accident. Instead, I say, is this an okay time to talk? And if they say no, I'm like, can I sit with you? And sometimes just sitting and breathing until they're calm, or until that hysteric feeling is gone, is a better time to come down. I hate that old adage, like, don't go to bed angry. I can get real mad if we just deep dive into this conversation for 2 hours. But I wake up so much smarter every single day, and that helps me be a better partner and a better support for my family. And so it is okay to say, I am too angry, can we talk in an hour or 10 minutes? Doesn't mean forget about it and never talk to it, no kid's getting out of it, but we're respecting their space to process as well. We also want to promote discussions of balance. There is this little myth that there are good days and there are bad days, but very few days work out really like that. I can think of some things that I have done well and I'm happy and proud about, and things that have also been frustrated and sad on most days. And I think modeling that balance for our kids is really important. At my house, I'm super cheesy, we do this at dinner time, and I don't care if Aunt Stevie and Aunt Kate are over, they're doing it too, or my friend who does not work in the mental health agency, everyone around the table says something that made them worried or sad or frustrated, and something that made them happy or proud. It takes 1 to 2 minutes, and everybody gets a chance. This also normalizes it that we all have these feelings that we're going through, and it's not just the kid who's having a hard time having to deal with their feelings in front of everyone, it's more of an active family effort as we're showing that there's balance in the day. Going back to just the validation piece, it can be really, really hard to try not to solve our kids' problems. But when we're thinking ahead about building these mentally healthy children and we're trying to promote resiliency, what we want to do is validate that all your feelings are normal and help coach them to think about what they would do next. I'm too afraid to ask for help. Yeah, that makes sense. Help is scary, and putting yourself out there, you don't know what the teacher's gonna say. What is the time you've done it's gone well? What is the time you've done it's not gone well? What do you feel like you're able to try to start? And kind of walking them through that, because if you say what you think you could do, you're actually more likely to do it than people saying it to you. And so I think it's important to just sit with our kids in the moment and let them have those feelings and go to the next thing. The other thing I think is talking about like characters in movies. So when they're younger, it's easy because Daniel Tiger spells it all out for us on what to do with every single feeling in a song form. A good friend recently on vacation taught me you can just make anything into a song as a coping skill, and so we've adapted that into my family. But my kid super hates it. But talk about the characters in the movies after you watch it. I loved watching that movie last night. Tell me what you thought that character was thinking. Why did the way they reacted seem different? These can be movies that are clearly about mental health, things like Inside Out, but they can also just be anything that kids love. If they're into Harry Potter, Pokemon, roll with that and kind of meet them where they're at and what will actually get them talking. I think, can we play the emotional intelligence video here and then go into the slide? I think that helps. Thanks so much.
Gina McDowell here again, and today I am joined by a special guest, Dr. Parker Houston, who is the Clinical Director of On Our Sleeves. Dr. Houston is here to chat with us about emotional empowerment and how we can teach our kids about this concept. So thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Houston.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Gina. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start off with emotions in general. Why is it important to talk with our kids about emotions?
Well, emotions are one of the things that set us apart as humans. It's part of our human experience. And one of the most important things about our lives is the range of emotions we can experience. And so for a lot of us, we experience a variety of emotions even on a daily basis. And some of those are really positive and some might be considered more negative or painful. And so throughout development, we learn how to understand and regulate and use our emotions in relationship. But those are skills that don't always come naturally to everybody. So we can talk with our kids about them from an early age and help get them started on the right track.
Absolutely, and you mentioned that there are emotions that are negative and painful. Is there such thing as a bad emotion?
No, there's certainly not. We should experience all the range of emotions at times in our lives. And emotional empowerment or emotional intelligence is not at all about avoiding certain emotions or trying not to feel sadness or not to feel frustration or anger. It's about being able to express those things appropriately and manage them so that they don't take over parts of our life and lead to problems with functioning or problems with social relationships, making it so that we can't complete the roles that we need to serve in our lives.
I think that's a great point. There are going to be times in our lives where we're going to experience these negative emotions, so figuring out how to be able to kind of sit with them and tolerate them and get through them successfully sounds like a huge skill. So can you explain the concept of emotional empowerment then?
Yeah, the idea of emotional empowerment is that emotions come from within us. They aren't put on us by the external environment, although they're influenced by the environment. And so the empowerment part is that we can learn to harness and control some parts of our emotions so that we can have better success in life, better relationships, that we can experience that range of emotions when needed. And so there's 5 steps in the process, although different people might say different number of steps, but we're going to have 5 steps in emotional intelligence for us, which is to be able to identify the emotions and what they mean, be able to recognize them as you're feeling them, so kind of know what state am I in right now and how is that impacting my thoughts and behavior, and being able to notice and understand emotions in others, which is a core component of empathy, which is really important for relationship building. and then being able to express our emotions appropriately, and then being able to regulate strong emotions through our individual coping strategies. And usually when we're talking about regulating, we're talking about the negative or painful emotions, but sometimes we have to regulate our positivity and our joy, because there are times in our life when maybe we're feeling joyful and someone else isn't, and so we have to be able to sort of regulate the happiness we feel and fit with the situation that we're in at the moment.
Yes, so what can adults do to help kids become better at managing some of these strong emotions?
Well, what I'd like to think is that there are some different activities with each of these steps in the process that we could do with kids. And frankly, even as adults, we can all benefit from practicing this a little bit more and being a little more intentional about these things. So if you think about what psychotherapy or self-help books that we as adults use, many of them are focused on elements of emotional empowerment, about how to understand ourselves better, what we're thinking, and how we're feeling in certain circumstances. So for kids, we can focus on things like early in life, simple emotion identification and expanding their variety of emotional language is the single best thing we can do. And then helping to name the emotions that they're feeling. As parents, we have the opportunity when we see someone who's upset or when they're feeling joy to label that for them and say, wow, it seems like you're feeling this way, is that right? And I can tell that because, and sort of describe what you're seeing and how you might be able to tell that they're feeling that way. And then another main thing to do is to read books with them or listen to stories with them and talk about the emotional parts of the story. How did that character feel in that moment? Or how would you feel if you were in that position? And it's sort of this education about using stories to illustrate different ways that people feel and how they respond to that. And all of that will help them build a better vocabulary moving forward in life.
That's great. It sounds like such great ideas for caregivers to start working with their kids on helping them feel emotionally empowered. So thank you so much for sharing this with us today. We really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, anytime, thanks.
So if you have thoughts around emotional empowerment that you would like to share, feel free to leave them in the comments section. That is all we have for you today. As always, don't forget to like us and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
I think our generation didn't teach this in that way. They kind of assumed we would get it, and now this new generation has this really wonderful time that we're actually learning how to teach our kids these things. How do you identify what emotions they are? How do you figure out what emotions you have and this other person has, and how do I modulate those emotions? And a lot of those tips we talked about would cover that. One of the things I think that's the most important about that video is that word practice. Talking through the situations ahead of time. We've been really thoughtful as a community about doing that for the scary things that kids might come up with and the peer pressure things, but what about, let's say you're really embarrassed in the classroom. What do you want to do? Let's say you feel so mad and that the teacher is wrong. What should you do in that scenario? And the more often you say that, the kid says that out loud, the more likely they are going to be to do that. It does not mean they will do it 100% of the time, because I would be out of a job. But then there's also when they do make a choice, okay, what went well out of what you chose to do and what do you wish you had done differently? And again, just that learning to revise and regroup, that's that skill that builds resiliency there. And so I think just the more we talk about it, normalize it. And so getting to this building resilience, it's the ability to cope through challenging situations, and we can never prepare for all of them. We can talk through all of the scenarios with our kid. We will not come up with the one that's going to happen next Thursday. But hopefully if we build up all these conversations, they can start to generalize those skills in different ways. Clinically, I call this distress tolerance. And the most resilient kids are the ones who built up this thing to tolerate stress. So how do we do that? How do we build these up? In addition to all the things we've already talked about, it's again building up your child's character in a lot of different ways. We don't want to speak to them as just an academic or just an athlete, but that I am a kind, good friend, and that I'm a skilled driver, and that I am really creative in my approach to the projects at school, and I surprise the teacher. We want them to feel good about themselves in a diversity of ways so they can appreciate themselves on that level. That way when something doesn't happen the way they want, they don't make a team, they don't get the friend they want, that will be hard, but they will have these other parts of themselves that they still appreciate at those times. Another thing we want to do is really praise the success that our kids feel and have. And that's not always just the accomplishment, so that's fine and important too. I think there's a lot of things they work for, we want to celebrate it. But it's a lot of the effort. I really appreciate that you have studied all week in this test. I know that wasn't the grade you wanted, but I could see how hard you tried. I can't believe that you stayed late, even though you knew I might have been mad, to help your friend through that thing. I can appreciate your thoughtfulness in that moment. And giving them a really detailed explanation of why you're proud of them and why you think they're making good choices helps them to continue doing that. We want to give kids pretty firm parameters too. There are some things we can negotiate, and there's other things that I think help them if they just know what to predict. Bedtime is one that comes up. This is family dependent. But there are some kids, we're going to negotiate that every night, and there's sometimes we give up and like it's fine. Some nights know it's solid, but they're always willing to have that fight, those kids. Sometimes when there is this like very even keel parameter, it helps them adjust their expectations to make it. Okay, I really want to have time to play this video game, so I'm going to get the homework done better at school during study hall, so I have time to play the video game because I know my parents aren't budging at that 10 o'clock time. And so sometimes these parameters can actually help them sort through complicated feelings that they have to make the right choices. Talking through these situations and having them have a say in some of the roles I think is okay, because that teaches them to think critically. What would you tell another family? Why would you argue for this later time? Why would you argue for an earlier time? And getting them to think through all the complexities and the decisions we've made for our kids helps them be more resilient when they're in unexpected situations. I think the hardest recommendation when we're really thinking about building up resilience too is allowing our kids to hurt. This was very easy to say before I had my own kid as a psychologist, and it is so painful as a parent to see them hurt. I just want to make it better. You're joyful, you're fun, you're growing and you're learning. You don't deserve to feel this way. But if we protect the kids from all the hardship, one day a hardship's going to come like a wave over them, and we're not going to be there to help them. And so it can be really important to let your kids' tower fall over and to sit back and say, okay, what do you think we do next? It can be helpful to let your kid try out for something you're not sure they're going to make and let them not make it and say, okay, what do we want to do next? Because that hardship is where they're going to stretch and learn. Another topic for building up resilience is some positive practice. And I think that really gets down to what Dr. Houston was saying in that video of talking it through and practicing these things. But it can also be real life consequences. Okay, you two 9-year-olds just slammed the door so loud that the painting fell off. I've asked you not to do that 3 times. What's maybe more powerful than a timeout? Maybe it's now you're gonna shut the door nicely 10 times in a row to really help your muscle get that motion down. And by that positive practice, the kids find that way more annoying than a timeout. And they get used to that. Muscle memory does start to kick in, and we can do this with a lot of different things. Okay, it sounds like you passed your curfew a little bit later than I would have expected. I'm going to ask you to work on coming home 15 minutes earlier than the next 3 times to show you can make it. So we can have some ways to help them learn throughout that don't always feel like our traditional behavioral consequences as we're trying to promote resiliency and thoughtfulness and distress tolerance. And when we're thinking about our physical well-being and our mental well-being, that combines into probably needing to change some routines, and change is so hard. You can think of all the things we know we're supposed to be doing for our bodies all the time. We all eat healthy, get 8 hours of sleep, floss every single night, everyone here, I'm sure. But when we try to do it, it's hard. So I think we want to really work with our kids and have them be part of the solution, and this can start at even toddler age. Having them come up with the reminders. Okay, what helps the reminder? Do you need a visual calendar? Do you need alarms? What will help? Do you need the medication laid out on the table right here for when you come down the stairs? Visual reminders are great because we like routines. In the shower, I do the same 3 things and I know that order, and if I skip one, I'm going to be all thrown off because we like to know this predictability, and helping our kids come up with that, what works for them, is important. I also work with a lot of families who are so encouraged and kids are really motivated to change a lot at once. That doesn't work very well. So picking one thing, okay, I see that there's these 3 things you want to work on. Let's pick the one that seems the easiest. We also want to start with the one that's the hardest, but then that could lead us to more unsuccess and have a harder time. But if we start with that easiest one, let's get this going, get our gears warmed. What did we learn from that? Now let's tackle the next one. That can help our children. And adjusting expectations. Nobody goes from doing, I'm gonna use my flossing one, flossing 0 times to 7 days a week that easily. Let's set a smaller goal. Let's just try it out a couple nights and see what worked. Then we'll add another night, then we'll add another night. The more we build, that feeling of effort equals success helps the kids get there. And I'm totally down for rewards. I think that is a normal thing in life. I hate cleaning my office. I make it a pigsty every 2 days. I sometimes will be like, you know what? You can have the dessert tonight if you clean this garbage up before you go home. That motivates me, and that's okay to have an external motivator. Because external motivators, things that are maybe not internally motivated, but that I get in reward for doing things, help me build that progress and that success in doing it, and that builds that internal motivation. And kids, it's normal life. We go to work, that's how we get a paycheck. If I don't go to work, they're not gonna pay me. So it's normal to teach that when I get through something hard, I get what I want. That's distress tolerance right there. This is a lot of information. I can appreciate that. I get really passionate and love to talk about it. On Our Sleeves has so many great handouts, things to help you, okay? I hear what you're saying, Nicole. I kind of want to do this. You sit down, your mind goes blank. That's normal. Print off some of these things. Try it out. See what your kids like. Hand them the website. I'm sure they're happy to dig through and look through and find the ones that seem like they fit them. And I'm just really proud of the work on here. I think a lot of contributors have made a really great educational resource bank. This is just kind of one example of the school challenges. Like under that tab, these are all the different types of resources they have. For the COVID-19 one, there are blogs, there are worksheets, there are conversation starters. So each one of those resource banks has all of this different type of information. Okay, so we're talking about all these ways to promote mental health and well-being. That said, sometimes we're still struggling, and that happens. Kids show it differently. I think in the movies, the person who's feeling depressed or anxious is like very overtly depressed and anxious, and that is not how our kids usually show it to us. We're looking more for these changes. We have a kid who's really talkative who got really quiet, or a kid who's really quiet who starts talking a lot. That's a change. That's a sign something's different. Maybe a kid is eating a little bit more, eating a little bit less. Maybe they're sleeping a little bit more, sleeping a little bit less. Yes, we know this changes throughout kids' development, but there's some things that particularly strike you. You're having such a hard time getting up at night. Is that because you're staying up at night playing video games? Or is that because you're up worrying and thinking over scenarios or just having disrupted sleep all night? That would be more of a change we want to talk about. Kids who typically are really social and don't really want to hang out. No, that doesn't sound fun. I don't really care about going. That's something that would make me pause as a change. A kid who really likes their individual activities and all of a sudden is finding reasons to be out of the house, there's a change. Some of this is natural, friend groups change, and some of it could be a sign that something else is going on. And I think that speaks to how complex kids are when we're trying to figure out what's going on. When all these symptoms present, it can get to thoughts of self-harm and suicidation, and that's when the Behavioral Health Pavilion has your back, and please don't hesitate to come. But I also want to think about mental health as not checkboxes. You're not depressed or not depressed. You're not anxious or not anxious. Most of the time, we live in this continuum. And we can think of times where we've been hanging over here in the anxious times, and I've had some really nice times. Sometimes I float throughout the day. We're looking more for a pattern. It's hitting 2 weeks and we're feeling stuck here. We're looking for when it gets in the way. I'm having trouble concentrating and getting my schoolwork done, or bringing myself to make it to choir practice. We're looking for when it takes away from our kids' happiness. That's when we want to really start addressing this and looking at maybe we need a mental health professional as well. And Nationwide Children's is not the only one who can help you. There's so many great resources in this community, and we are working to amplify all of that too. Tap into your school resources. Talk to their teachers. See if they see the same things. Talk to the school counselors and see what initiatives they have going on and what support is there. Nationwide Children's also has infiltrated a lot of the schools just to give them licensed social workers on site to help them through these types of concerns. Ask your mental health services from your primary care provider, or even just calling your insurance company to get the list that's actually pre-approved. I hate when I give someone a list and they call and their insurance doesn't jive with all of them. So sometimes having the right list to start with can be really helpful. There's a website called Psychology Today, and there are so many different providers on there, and you can search terms, you can search backgrounds to find people that might feel more in line with you and that are more trained by you. And we also really mean it that you can interview them. If your kid does not hit it off with that first person, take a step back and evaluate. Is it because they are saying, heck no therapy, or is it because like that isn't the right person? Because if that's not who they're going to open up to, and we keep pushing it there, then they might leave with a bad impression of what mental health services can be. And so going and finding out another provider might be the right call. There is also a text crisis line that I have a lot of patients put in their phone just to have in an emergency. I can find that resource for you afterwards, but it's, if you just Google text crisis line, it comes right up. There's an ability to text on your phone, and there's an ability to type right on the computer, and they are mental health volunteers that are available 24 hours a day, and they are wonderful. They are able to support kids when they're in just maybe like the hyperventilating crisis of like, I've had kids call when they failed a test and they can't think about telling their parent, I'm just so overwhelmed, and then they talk it through and they're able to get home and talk. And I've hit all the way up to, I'm not okay, I'm thinking of doing things that'll hurt myself, and they've gotten them to a safe place. So it is a wonderful, always available resource. Nationwide Children's also has their own crisis line that you can call and talk through. Sometimes they just stay on the phone, talk through you till you're feeling calm and have a plan for the night, and if they do think you need more, they'll bring you in. But I don't want kids to think that just because they call, we want to support first and see what level of care you need. I don't think I've given a talk in the past 3 years that I haven't talked about us as parents, because this is so hard. Parenting was hard before all of this COVID pandemic things. They're complex, they're hard, and we love them and worry about them so much that can almost boggle our minds to the point where we don't think straight. I can see everybody else's kids and think of good ideas, but with mine, they just care so much. But it's just harder, and it's a lot of responsibility to raise this future generation. Also, we kept thinking that 2021 was going to be better, and it didn't feel better at all. And Gina found all these funny pictures that actually stressed me out a little bit. So, I don't know, 2020 is good. We are just as susceptible to all of these feelings, in some ways sometimes more, because we have this whole added layer to the things that we're doing to care for our children and keep our households afloat and continue to be productive members of society. These are the symptoms of anxiousness and depressiveness, and I just wanted to make sure we ran them all down. We didn't have a slide for depression, but I'm going to just say that. When we're looking at feelings of anxiousness, that is feeling uneasy, nervous, and worried. We all feel uneasy, nervous, and worried, but it gets to the point where it's hard to concentrate, it is hard to get things done, and it is hard to make it stop. I might be nervous about this talk, but if I turn on Lady Gaga, I can jam out on the way here. But if I literally am just still ruminating about it, then it's getting in the way of my ability to function and prepare, and would actually get in the way of my ability to talk today. So that is when worry becomes more of anxiety. It often comes with a lot of physical sensations too, rapid heart rate, sweaty palms. We can see just feeling fidgety or anxious or having some GI distress, because our mental well-being has such an impact on our physical well-being. And when we physically feel worse, we mentally have a harder time concentrating. When you're looking at symptoms of depression, that is feeling more sad or down, or just more cranky. Sometimes it shows up as just being very irritable and frustrated. It can be feeling hopeless or things not going to get better. It can be losing interest in doing things that you really liked to do generally. And then it's, again, eating more or less, sleeping more or less, having a hard time sitting still, or feeling very fatigued and lethargically slow, and sometimes progressing to that point of self-harm or wishing we were dead. The thing we can do the best for ourselves is normalize that we're all feeling a little bit anxious, and that does not mean we have anxiety, but this is just an anxious provoking situation. Raising kids is anxious provoking. And by normalizing it for ourselves, we help the skills that we're trying to do for our children and normalizing it for them. There's also a lot of change fatigue. There has been a lot of change in the past year and a half again. Yeah. I know right before school started, felt like one of the most intense periods for parents as they thought about all the different policies, and policies kept changing, and then one day school shut down, and one day they're back, and then your work changed, and then your family life changed. We're tired of changing, and we don't get a choice, and that can be really hard. So when we're faced with these changes, what can we do? The first thing is probably expect it. That's hard to do too. I can expect it in theory. When I have to deal with it, I'm not as happy. And so I really get to the point of also letting yourself grieve and be mad. It is okay to not agree with some of the change. It is okay to not want to do it. It is okay to just take a night and cry, eat ice cream, drink wine, whatever you do for yourself, to have just a moment to let yourself have that space. Because that's what I'm asking you to do for your kids, to validate that your feelings are normal and this is a lot. And then I know you will wake up and you will start to make a plan and you will start to adjust expectations. You'll start to look at, okay, this feels like a big deal this week and it is gonna make a hard week, but in the longer term, I know this isn't gonna have as big of a deal. Or you're gonna say, I know this is gonna be a bigger deal later. Right now it doesn't affect me as much. What can I control? What can I change? And those are the important questions to ask yourself. What can I control? What can I change? What in the past has made some of these changes easier? What in the past has made some of these changes harder? Have I reached out to enough people to ask for help? We often don't ask for help. We like to do things. We like to help everyone else when they're in hardship. Asking for help is a gift to yourself and it's a gift to the people around you. The people around you often want to help and aren't sure how. But by saying, this is something you could do for me, that really helps a lot of other people too. And it models to your kid that they can't do it all alone, that we need our village. The other thing I've noticed a lot with families and seen some success in is check-ins. So, okay, we came up with this plan and we start going. But how do we know if the plan's working? We're too busy all the time to figure it out. Maybe I'm not happy, but I'm too stressed to figure it out. Sometimes setting 5 to 10 minutes aside with your kids, with your partner, with your big support group to say what's going well and what maybe could we be doing differently can change that whole context for a week in just a couple of minutes. Again, not everything has to be a 1 hour time-intensive thing. 2 to 5 minutes of learning how to regroup, reset, can help yourself. Self-care feels like a luxury. That's what nice people get. I've got too much going on. Yet, the car eventually will run out of gas if you don't stop at the gas station, which I need to do on the way home, and then your car will stop. So caring for ourselves is really important because we're the cars that are taking our kids to this next stop. How do you do that? I think it looks different for everybody and what they feel. What I tend to do is talk about things being in boxes. Let's look at the past week of your life. Have you done anything creative? Well, for me, I cook a new recipe. That to me is creative. For other people, it's drawing and artwork. For other people, it's drawing those cool hopscotches that everybody was doing pre-COVID. It's doing something that's a little bit different that sets it up. Have I done anything social? Have I reached out to a friend? Have I just texted some memes to someone? Have I set up a Zoom date or a happy hour date or something that makes me feel fulfilled? Have I done anything physical? Have I moved my body in a week outside of just my normal errands because my body is acclimated to my normal errands? But have I run? Have I done yoga? Have I gone for a walk somewhere else? And lastly, have I done something relaxing? Have I given myself the space to read a book, to take a bath, to take a long shower, to take an enjoyment drive? However you relax is up to you. But looking at that week and saying, creative, social, physical, relaxing, what have I done? I don't know if anybody checks those boxes off every single day, but in a week, if you start to see that there's one consistently lacking, maybe we could think about what we could be doing differently for ourselves, because again, that models to your kid that it's okay to take time for yourself. Maybe that's saying, I've had a really bad day, and I'm gonna forego all those plans I just made in Dr. Nicole's talk, and we're gonna do them another day. That's okay for self-care, because if we keep you running, the long term for your kids is better. This kind of just is a nice picturesque example of, again, how everything is in a continuum and how our self-care can start to push us onto that other side of the continuum in terms of our mental health improving. And other ways to show you that your self-love. Just being, again, really creative. I think some of these ideas are being a little selfish and scheduling your own downtime, finding the things to do for yourself. Maybe it's staying up late one night even though you know you like your sleep because you want to make time to watch that show that everyone's watching and talking about because you feel left out in the conversations. Or I really want to do this early morning yoga and asking your partner to take the time to take the children to school or do bus stop duty. is asking for help and being a little selfish and thinking about what are the things that make me happy, and all of those things are okay. I would be happy to take any questions here publicly if you feel comfortable asking. I'm also happy to hang back for a couple minutes if you have something more personal or you don't want to share in front of the group.
I just have a quick question, and I'm looking for any tips or tricks. You can probably hear me without the microphone.
Just for the video.
Oh, sure. I want to know any tips or tricks that you can use if a parent has an undiagnosed or untreated mental health issue, and how to prevent problems or complications in their children. For example, something like a personality disorder or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's a really vulnerable place to be, I think, as a parent too, because you have this thing running in your mind sometimes, almost assessing how they're doing all the time, because we find ourselves looking for these things. And I hear that personality disorders, bipolar, substance use conditions that are family genetic, we can't help looking for those things because we care so much about our children. I think sometimes even just setting check-in points with yourself on when you want to check in and look at their behavior over the past time and assess kind of what path they're going down, to take away that running narrative in the back and think, okay, every 3 months I'm going to take a second, I'm going to think about it and look at their behavior and see if there's any risk factors. Meeting with a mental health provider early sometimes just helps you talk out some of those specifics and really know exactly what to look for and what really the new data is on pediatrics and these conditions. But that resilience factor is a huge one. It's learning how to be empathetic towards others and how to manage pain and feel frustration. And I think the generations before, I believe, may have a higher incidence rate because that wasn't something we were doing at these times before. But when you're really looking at the basis of a lot of these disorders, it comes down to that true dysregulation and an ability to sometimes perceive how others are feeling. So maybe it's overextending ourselves, talking about it a lot. How do you think your teacher felt when you said that? How do you think your friend felt when you said that? How do you think I felt when you said that? And always having them verbalize out loud, I think you felt mad. To me, I thought I looked really upset, but you took it as mad, and I thought I looked scared. Okay, let me talk about the cues I was trying to show you, and teaching them very, very specifically what your eyeballs do when you feel that way, what your mouth does, what your body language does, and what your words do. And I hope that helps, and I'm happy to stay after too. Get the microphone.
I'm curious, and this may not come out correctly, so I'm noticing there's a lot of women in the audience, minus Mr. Wolf, maybe a couple up there. Curious as far as thinking of moms and women, and a lot of this type of stuff of the talking of feelings and emotions, and I think it comes maybe naturally to us, maybe not so much, but that nurturing caregiver type thing. And I'm just curious, when you think about your partner, whoever you are at home, but I'm thinking about men and the husband, of having to encourage them and get them on board with this stuff. I mean, my husband is super supportive, he has stuff with the kids, but how do I explain this stuff to him? Or how do I, just kind of that working as that family unit where it's like, I need you to express your feelings a little better so I can teach them. You know what I mean? And he's learning, we're all figuring this out together, but I just feel like the man, woman, that kind of dynamic, and just kind of some thoughts on this with the male perspective.
I think that's super fair. I live in a pretty egalitarian household. I feel like we divide things really, really equally. We thought, okay, we're doing it perfect, our kid's gonna be perfect. And then I said, Rob, can you grab the casserole out of the oven? And my son's like, dads don't use ovens. I was like, are you kidding me? We do so much work. And my husband's fantastic. But I do all the cooking because I love cooking. That's my self-care. And it changes these dynamics, and these kids find these ways to pigeonhole things. So I think it's a very fair point. I also know my partner doesn't like when I give them a lot of feedback. So I think it's really just making it more of a family conversation. Here's what I've noticed. Johnny has been acting a little bit more aggressive at school when things are going wrong. We've taught him all these skills, and we're both doing a good job promoting those skills, but something still seems there. What do you think has gone well? What do you think has not gone well? I'm wondering if we could all do this together. Again, we don't want it to be dad has to work on it or kid has to work on it, but it's like family goals, I think, is what really, again, helps build that resilience too. We did family meetings growing up, but it usually ended up people tattling on each other. You can structure family meetings to be more like a team. What do we want to work on together? What do we want to do better? And getting the kids involved and dad involved and mom involved, I think, shows the distribution of the work and also increases the commitment. So even if families are like, I want to do more fun things with the kids, but like I'm strapped, I'm doing so much, it's not that I don't care. Setting that out there. Okay, everybody, we said we wanted to do more fun things, but I myself cannot do all the fun planning. Dad, what could you contribute? Kid, what could you contribute? And then you're kind of sharing that this is a family thing. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does.
I answered it all.
I can't tell. There. I just wanted to mention one thing. I think everyone who's here, hopefully enjoyed this wonderful program tonight. There's a book called Permission to Feel. I'm blanking on the author at the moment, but if you were to Google that or just check it out on Amazon or at the library, it talks through a lot of the things that you went through tonight, and I think you would find it a helpful resource for any additional questions you might have as well. Oh, okay.
While she's walking up there too, I didn't bring a list of apps. I really regret that. I'm sorry, but I can send those out if people want to ask. There's a bunch of mental health apps for kids of all ages that I think sometimes are more palatable when their phone is telling it to them and not us.
So not a question,
Okay.
but if we're recommending books, I would recommend a book by Darshan Narvaez, who was a psychologist at Notre Dame. And the book is called Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality. And Darshan's work emphasizes that human beings are like every sort of species on the planet. They have a niche that they evolved or were created to occupy. And as soon as you remove people from that niche, you can expect the development of an unhappy person. So her work is concerned with looking into what is the human niche within which children are historically raised, and what sort of children can you expect when you provide them what they've ought to anticipate. So for me, I think it was a pretty groundbreaking book. So the book is Darshan Narvaez, Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality.
I have not read that, but I will look into it. Thank you.
Last call for questions. I think we're good. Thank you so much to our speaker tonight.
Thank you for having me.